I call to order this Board of County Commissioners of Sweetwater County, our regular meeting for today. We do have a quorum present. We have 4 commissioners here in chamber. Commissioner Shainfeld is excused. We're expecting her or hoping that she'll join with us later on via Zoom. She is in Cheyenne attending to her duties as assigned by the governor. So wish her safe travels and appreciate everyone being here with us today. If you would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and afterwards a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll carry on without video and just audio for a moment. Commissioners, we have an agenda. What is your pleasure with that agenda?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion regarding the agenda? Tab C, we are not going to be doing today. We have Memorial Hospital of Sweetwater County
Vote on the agenda.
is the slip board is moving forward with a no. I'm pointing out the word. I'm amending the agenda. Yeah. So tab C, I would make a motion to amend the agenda and remove tab C. The SLIB listened to the proposals from Memorial and many others. They'll be taking action this week, tomorrow, they expect. So Tiffany Marshall is not going to be here with us today to give us an update because she doesn't have one.
So moved to amend the agenda by removing tab C.
Thank you. We have a second on that.
I second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then to approve the updated agenda, any other changes in discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Our consent agenda, tab A. What is your pleasure, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling,
I'll make motion to approve the consent agenda as approved.
thank you. I have a
Or as
motion.
presented, sorry.
We'll do that too.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. On to tab B, planning and zoning.
Morning, Eric. Morgan.
Starting
Or
with
Megan,
Morgan's-
I'm sorry.
Megan's this morning, right? Starting off with Megan, go get them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners. We've got 2 public hearings before you today, and the first is with Corey Berdard and his wife, Bridget Renteria. It's a conditional use for an accessory structure exceeding 100% of the gross floor area of the residence. The address of the property is 430 Washington Street out in Jamestown. If you guys are familiar with the excuse me, Texas Travel Camp, now known as Green River RV Park. It's just a little bit down the hill out there. The current zone of the property is R2. It's also within the growth management area, so please keep that in mind. And infrastructure that is currently out on the property, of course, Green River Fire Response now, and Rocky Mountain Power, and Jamestown Rio Vista Water and Sewer District, and also the access point is off of Washington Street, which is a county road. As you can see from the zoning map, most of the property properties in the area are actually CRS, which is Commercial and Recreational Services. Please keep this in mind as we are going through this public hearing today as, excuse me, my voice is not ready this morning. A lot of uses that can be allowed in a commercial and recreational service do actually call for larger structures. So please keep that in mind. Again, there are some R2 adjacent properties, but they're up on the hill and a little bit over. It's definitely mixed owned in this area of Jamestown. And just a little bit of background. The reason why we're here today is because Corey Bernard is wanting to build a 5,600 square foot garage that will be roughly 35 feet in height and attach it to his existing home, which is on site. The garage is proposed to be roughly 70 feet by 80 feet. This would exceed his primary residence by about 2,000 square feet. So pretty large structure on the property. And per our Sweetwater County zoning regulations, this can be done by going through the conditional use process. And that's why we're here today. And just a little bit of background on where we were at. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a lot of information coming forward. So just wanted to let you know that in discussions with both Corey and his wife, Bridget, we have been assured that this is not just going to be a big metal shop. It's going to be either stuccoed or it's going to be finished in something to blend in the house. He wants both the garage and his home to look like one cohesive structure. They plan to use the garage as storage for their motorhome, their boat, and other various equipments that's currently sitting out in the weather right now. And while I was visiting the site with Mr. Jim Zimmerman on November 1st, we were also told that they have already purchased the building materials for this garage, and they are already on site, which you can see in the additional photos when we get to that point. And Corey is also still working with his attorney and our Sweetwater County attorney, John De Leon, on resolving an encroachment issue with his retaining wall being in the Sweetwater County road right away for Washington Street. As you can see, the topography kind of in this area, they're a little bit in a hole. It's quite unique. On the north and east side of the property, there are two sections of retaining walls, a lower section and then one that's quite a bit higher. So his property kind of sits down in a hole, and you've got trees that surround the south boundary and a little bit on the west side as well on his property. Here you can see the proposed garage and where it should be situated on the site. And you can see him calling out where those concrete walls and everything are and where it's going to sit in relationship to his house that is currently on site. Here's the floor plan that he proposed. There will be 4 garage doors on the north side of the structure, and also in conversations with Corey, we have been told that on the west side, the side facing Washington Street, there will also be large windows in attempt to make it not look like a big metal building, more kind of make it look a little bit more residential. Mr. Jim Zimmerman went out and posted pictures on the property for public notice. You can see the retaining wall in the view to the east that is dealing with the encroachment that we'll probably get into a little bit further today. And we've also chosen to take a few more pictures just to kind of show the other retaining walls that are on the property and just where the building will kind of sit. In the bottom 2 on the left, you can see where the retaining walls are. And you can see all of his Connex boxes, the motorhome, other construction equipment out there. That's pretty much where that building is going to be sitting. And then in the top middle picture and then the bottom right, that's the retaining wall that is in the Washington Street right away.
Mr. Chairman, Megan,
Yes.
when you look at that bottom picture on the bottom left, the bottom two, and that's where you're saying the building's going to be placed. How, with the building being 35 foot high, how much of it will be sticking out of that hole above those walls?
That is a very good question. One of the things that we can't really do right now as a land use department is we don't have software, or we've not been provided by the applicant even a 3D rendering to kind of judge the height of it with existing features that are on the property. And I am not seeing Mr. Bernard or his wife here today. I'm not sure where they are at. They were here last week and were told about the meeting here this week. Otherwise, I would defer to him just for reference on that one.
Then one other question. It's obvious that those retaining walls are, it looks like they're poured concrete in those pictures. When you look at the bottom right picture, is that the retaining wall that's on the right of way?
That is correct.
And that's a portable, that looks like it's sectional and it's,
that is
is that
correct.
correct? So that's easy to move off.
That
I mean,
is correct.
Not easy to move off, but at least it doesn't have to be
It doesn't have to be demolished.
They're
to be
demolished. Thank
removed
you.
off. Yep. And
Appreciate
those are more kind of the prefabbed wall barricades that you see them use on the interstate and just other construction sites. So those are portable. It's a portable retaining wall that was built essentially.
Looks like the same stuff they use for sand and salt buildings.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Tillman.
I would just say as a point of reference, the tree height would give you some idea of how high that building would be. What's a tree, 35 feet? That's about how high a tree is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 9 review criteria that we have for the conditional use process, and we'll jump right into it. The first one is this conditional use process consistent with the comprehensive plan? And the comprehensive plan encourages orderly growth and development in locations that contribute to economic and social well-being of county residents. I've chosen to combine criteria 2 and 3 just for ease of not trying to separate things out and make the explanation of fact finding a little bit easier. Shall not adversely affect adjacent properties and compatible with existing and allowable uses of adjacent properties. Proposed garage is nearly 2,000 square feet larger than the existing home and is proposed to be 35 feet tall, which would be the maximum for an R2 property, R2 zone property. Even though the property sits much lower than the properties to the north and east of this, the proposed garage still would be extremely large and uncharacteristic for the area. As of right now, there are not any other buildings this large in the tight vicinity that was shown within the previous zoning map. But I would have you keep in mind again that on commercial and recreational services, CRS zone property, you can have large commercial structures as I've mentioned before. So this, I would have you guys please keep that in mind as we are going forward, just because it's not allowed under the use chart. We do need to keep in mind just how the area is zoned in general as well. And I would also like to bring to your attention that we did receive one comment that was against the proposal from the neighbor to the south, Mr. Jasperson. This has subsequently been withdrawn after our planning and zoning meeting last week. Mr. Jasperson and I and Mr. Eric Bingham had a discussion with Mr. Jasperson, the criteria that the Planning and Zoning Commission set in place, and Mr. Jasperson was confident that his concerns were addressed with those additional conditions added on to the recommendation. So he has chosen to withdraw his comment, so that will not be seen in the public meeting today. Criteria number 4, the property does have all adequate facilities required for a residential property. Criteria number 5, adequate provisions for maintenance and of the use and associated structures. Mr. Bernard will have to get an approved construction permit if this conditional use permit is approved. He has applied for a construction permit, so we do have that on file. That is actually one of the conditions that we will get into a little bit further. But if this conditional use permit is approved and the construction permit is approved, Mr. Jim Zimmerman will have to go on site to inspect the garage after construction is complete. And criteria number 6, staff does not foresee any adverse effects on the natural environment. Criteria number 7, will not create undue traffic congestion. As long as the garage is used for residential purposes, staff does not see any problems with this traffic congestion or anything like that. Criteria number 7 will not adversely affect public health, safety, or welfare, and staff does not foresee any issues with these 3 items. And criteria number 9 conforms with the zoning resolution. This request does conform, since that is the whole reason why we are here today, is to go through the conditional use process. Colorado Interstate Gas was the only agency that did respond to our comment forms that went out, and they don't have any facilities in the area, so thus they have no concerns with this conditional use permit. And at last week's meeting on November 9th, 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval with the following conditions. The wall encroachment into Sweetwater County right-of-way on Washington Street issue is to be resolved prior to the approving of the construction permit for the garage. Shipping containers are to be removed from the property once the garage has been constructed. An exterior of the garage is to be finished, whether it's stucco, decorative rock. It's not just to be a big metal building. And all these criteria were very well hashed out in the meeting last week. Commissioner Lloyd was there and can offer further explanation with that. That's all I have at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Questions for Megan?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling.
yeah, just a couple, 2 or 3. Under one condition, the issue to be resolved regarding the encroachment of the retaining wall. What are the options there that were discussed for the owner?
The options that were discussed, one was for the wall to be completely removed. Currently, Mr. Bernard and his lawyer in Sweetwater County, attorney John De Leon, are working on an easement agreement that would be 20 years at last. Discussion to basically kind of surround the wall. And I am actually going to let Mr. De Leon expound on that a little bit further, since he's been the one in further discussions with us.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wendling, so your options are just as described. It would be removal or an easement, and you will have an opportunity to address to take a look at the different variations of easement that you can consider when that's appropriate.
Okay, so the planning and zoning board will be dealing with that.
So the recommendation, the condition recommended is that before construction starts, that issue be resolved in a fashion that is acceptable both to Mr. Bernard and to you as a board, whether that choice ends up being removal or whether that choice is some form of easement. That'll be your discretion. But as this permit is recommended, you would have time to make those decisions, and you would have to get on the same page before construction starts.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr.
Other-
Chairman,
Question, please.
Yes. Wendling.
I've got to ask this question because we all know the elections just finished up, and thanks to the voters of Sweetwater County, the special purpose tax passed, and one of those part of the referendum, I believe, was the Jamestown sewer and water improvement. my question becomes this is with this construction project as well as any others, is there going to be any placement of plumbing, i.e. toilets and that type of thing in this building? Eric, do you know? Is there a plan for it?
As of right now, we were not made known that there would be any plumbing installed in this.
The only reason I bring it up is because I think since we know that it's going to be a while, basically money's been approved. Jamestown can do something now. And I'm thinking as we look at some of these things in order to get to relieve pressure from possible septic tanks and drainage fields leaching into the river with raw sewage, not treated, but raw. I think at some point in time, as these things are looked at near the river, there needs to be that possibility or that allowance to begin to condition those permits as to if there's any plumbing hookups or anything there, if it's possible legally to require people to begin to hook up to the sewer, new sewer when it becomes available.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Jamestown Rio Vista is their own governmental entity, and they actually have the power to do that by state statute, as you're familiar with. If they're within 400 feet of a sewer line, they have to connect on, but that is up to the discretion of Jamestown Rio Vista. Now, as far as zoning requirements go, we will back up whatever the Jamestown Rio Vista district wants to do by our regulations. There's regulations in there that state that, you know, if the district requires public sewer, then they have to connect on. And that's kind of our backing regulation that backs behind whatever Jamestown Rio Vista wants to do. As far as the project goes for a special purpose tax, the requirements, well, as far as what they've got proposed is a sewer line out to this intersection, a trunk line that goes out there and connects into the city of Green River sewer system. So that is what's on the ballot. But again, it's up the discretion of Jamestown Rio Vista. So that's a very good point. I don't think it's required as a part of this permit, just because this will be in basically an unmanned facility, an accessory structure compared to the house that's going to be. But there is state law that will back up if the Jamestown Rio Vista so desires to put a sewer line in there. There was an issue as far as this easement goes. Now that you're bringing that up, there was a fire hydrant that was actually in the proposed easement. And so that's why there was some adjustments that had to be made to that easement. And I believe that's been shrunk down a little bit so that that fire hydrant's not in there, because you can imagine the complications with that. If you've got a fire hydrant it's not well, I guess it is. It's an easement for someone to have their retaining wall within a county right of way. So just keep that in mind, that has been adjusted, but good comments, Commissioner Wendling.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Tillman.
Well, I just think the building probably would help clean up the view around there if he's able to put all of his toys inside instead of having them all over the lot. So to me, it looks like it would be a benefit.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd?
I just want to make sure, I was here the other day at the meeting, that Mr. Jasperson has removed his concern in this complaint at this point, just to clarify. Okay.
That was a yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, me.
one of Mr. Jasperson's, bid concerns was the storage of the Connex boxes, the motorhome, everything that he has on his property. And when we told him what the 3 conditions were coming out of the planning and zoning meeting last week, he said that is more than enough for me to withdraw my comment.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions? Then we will open this up for a public hearing regarding resolution 22-11-ZO-01 for approval of a conditional use permit for a structure accessory. So if you'd like to make a comment, please come up to the podium, identify yourself, and limit your comments to 2 minutes or so, a couple minutes. Any comments? Last chance. Okay, we'll close our Public hearing on that. 10 commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion to approve the numbered whatever resolution.
22-11-ZO-01.
So stated.
Thank you.
I make a motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Lloyd.
just want to make sure that second includes the fact that we are following, going to put all the additional concerns and comments added to that with the conditional use.
Excellent. Yes. Conditions are enumerated 1 through 3 in the resolution. Any other further comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And we carry on to our public hearing number 2, Rose Rock Holdings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do want to point out some people that are here for the Board of County Commissioners benefit. As far as Love's Truck Stop, we do have Mr. Kim Van Dyke that is here. Also online, we have Darren Kaufman with YDOT. We have Amelia Jordan with Apex. She is a senior project engineer on this project. Terry Lee with Joint Powers Water Board, and then Brian Seppi is also here with Joint Powers Water Board. Scott, I don't know your last name, but when you get up to present, you can give that. That'd be great. So let's get started, Mr. Chairman. So the property owner is Rose Rock Holdings, which is also the applicant. And we all know where Love's Truck Stop is, 8901 Highway 374. Site is approximately 4,000 feet from Jamestown Rio Vista residential subdivision. Zoning is commercial. It's within the growth management area. Green River Fire Response. It's within the Jamestown Rio Vista Water and Sewer District. Rocky Mountain Power provides power. And then we have the proposed private sewer treatment facility, and it's on Dominion Energy Gas. There is a picture, aerial photography of the site, which shows you the zoning that surrounds it. Just for clarification, that rural residential to the south is commercial. That was changed a year or so ago. And then properties to the east are commercial. To the west is agricultural, which is undeveloped and is owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And then you have the interstate and then the golf course to the north of the interstate, which you can see in the aerial photography. So there's a commercial subdivision just to the east of that. So as you know, we having problems. If it's not the voice, it's the microphone. Okay. I don't know what's going on today, Megan, but Love's is proposing to amend their existing conditional use. So we have an existing conditional use. And under the previous permit, we had a underground injection sewage disposal system that was approved by the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. That system has failed. And so that's why the applicant is seeking a sanitary sewage treatment facility with an activated sludge wastewater treatment system. And then the treated effluent will be sent to the Green River. And just YDOT, I believe, has approved the permits to go into the state right of way. The county has not approved any road crossings because they have to go through this conditional use process. So the existing conditional use for the truck stop facility includes a convenience store, automotive pumps, truck fuel pumps, fast food restaurant, and tire shop. And then the auto and truck fuel pumps are under separate canopies adjacent to the convenience store, fast food restaurant. And then the tire shop is a separate facility. The applicant has received approval of construction of this sewage treatment facility. They have, and you'll see it's a part of the packet, the WPDES, which allows them to discharge into the Green River. And then there's a 404 permit verification. There's another permit for the actual facility itself. And then the Army Corps of Engineers has also approved a permit. There's the conditional use application. And then here is a site plan, drainage plan. And then if you look on the bottom right of the drawing, that is actually where the sewage treatment facility will be located. And the applicants here is going to go through a PowerPoint to explain that system. Okay, I'll go through the permit. Quite lengthy permit. It has effluent standards in there. Okay, and here's the site plan again. And then the site photos, as you've all been out there, the property to the south is undeveloped. Part of the reason it is undeveloped is the developer or the property owner there wants high density type of subdivision out there, and you can't have that without public sewer. And as we know, there's no public sewer out there. There have been improvements also, as you've seen, on Highway 374 out there that the applicant was required under the previous conditional use permit. So is it consistent with applicable provisions of comprehensive plan? So does it continue in a manner that contributes to economic and social well-being? As we know, this site provides local jobs, truck vehicle stop for travelers of Interstate 80, for food and motor vehicle fueling services, which includes truck service and maintenance. In addition, the site provides additional space for semi-tractor trailer parking when the highway closes. The reason for the amendment is, again, already went through this, is due to the failure of the system. The Joint Powers Water Board is recommending more frequent sampling than the monthly as required by DEQ. Just for your information, point of information, the DEQ only requires monthly monitoring, and then those monthly reports are submitted on a quarterly basis. So the concern there is that those reports are only being submitted on a quarterly basis. So you'll see in some conditions that are being proposed some more frequent sampling. Is it compatible with existing or allowable uses? Again, this is commercial. As far as the facility goes, it has commercial types of uses around it. And can the request demonstrate adequate facilities? Currently, because this existing septic has failed, the applicant owner is having to pump and truck the sewage from the facility to the City of Green River sewage system. And the applicant is proposing to install a sewage treatment facility and discharge that effluent into the Green, which will be upstream for the Joint Powers Water Treatment Facility. And you can imagine there's been some concerns about that. The request has minimized the greatest degree possible adverse effects of the natural environment. You know, staff does suggest obviously that the best long-term solution for this area is public sewer. As when this report was actually created, it was before the election. And so we've seen the specific purpose test has passed, and a part of that is a sewer line out to the Jamestown area. Staff recommends if planning and zoning approved it, a timeframe be placed on the Jamestown Rio Vista pursues public sewer options. So when we get to the conditions, you'll see that there is a time frame on this permit of 5 years. The reason for the 5 years, the Planning and Zoning Commission did feel, because we discussed 2 years, 3 years, some other options there to speed things along so that they could get connected on the public sewer. The Planning and Zoning Commission was a little bit concerned that too tight of a time frame to give Jamestown Rio Vista enough time to apply for the proper permits, to do a master plan and things like that. So that's why the 5 years was placed on there. And again, adversely affecting public health, safety, and welfare. That's our biggest concern, is obviously that there's constant monitoring. When staff actually recommended monthly, we went down to weekly monitoring now, is what's been recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then those weekly reports would be forwarded to both the county and then the Joint Powers Water Board.
Eric, how often would those be reported? Still quarterly, or?
As far as DEQ goes, yes, but as one of the conditions that's in the conditional use permit, if those So in that report, it'll show the effluent limitations. And so if those are exceeded, we will forward that immediately to DEQ. But to answer your question, yes, as far as state statute and the rules and regulations of DEQ, they can only require what's required by statute. So monthly and then the quarterly. But if we see something in a weekly report or the Joint Powers Water Board does, we can forward that information on to DEQ.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Colorado Interstate Gas, they had no concerns. Public Works Director that the crossing permits. Mr. Legursky is waiting to see the results of this hearing to see whether or not those obviously will be passed or approved. WYDOT, Darren Kaufman, who is also online, had no objections to the system, but there are some punch list items that are not been fulfilled by Loves, and they're just asking that we include those as conditions so that they are finished and finalized, some electrical work, things like that. So that is one of the conditions that's on the permit. There have been some comments from the Director of Public Works, which was included with your packet. I won't go through these. They are here. So if they have any more further questions. And then the Joint Powers Water Board had some concerns. They are also here. And Andy Hooten with Green River City comments have also been included. So it was a 3-hour hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission, heavily scrutinized the permit, and it was voted 5-0 to recommend approval with these conditions. And so the owner operator of this treatment facility shall operate, maintain the plant in accordance with all applicable federal, state, and local requirements. The operator of the plant shall be a certified operator as proposed by Loves. So we cannot require that by state statute that it be a certified operator. There was a lot of concerns on a private system of having a certified operator because by state law, you do not have to have a certified operator. We were pleased to hear that Loves is proposing that that operator be certified. So that has been actually proposed by the applicant and we've included as a condition. The spill prevention certified containment plan that was originally in the first permit shall be continually maintained. The approval of the conditional use is contingent upon WYDOT final inspection, approval and acceptance of 2 WYDOT access permits, which are listed there, and associated conditions of the Loves travel stop off of Highway 374. These 2 accesses are awaiting permit approval and require a number of outstanding punch list items with highway lighting, electrical work to be addressed, and the submission of as constructed plans of all highway mitigations associated with this development by the applicant. The proposed direct access shown onto Highway 374 will not be allowed by WYDOT. Access to and from the facility must be provided intentionally via the Loves travel stop site. Condition 5, the applicant owner operator of the wastewater plant shall submit a copy of the weekly effluent sampling requirements as outlined by Table 1C of the WPDES permit, and failures to the Sweetwater County Land Use Department and Joint Powers Water Board for review. If the weekly report shows effluent limits are exceeded, staff shall forward a copy of the report to the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality. 2 Sweetwater County Type A licenses will need to be obtained in order to cross Oxbow Drive and Ox Yoke Drive. And both roads will need to be patched at a minimum 4-inch and asphalt pavement and 8-inch of grading W road base for the entire length of the road crossing. Only one road can be closed at a time for construction operations and patching. The license will not be granted by Sweetwater County until the WYDOT easement is granted and the Water Quality Division for the review and enforcement. All trash dumpsters shall be covered and maintained with a solid fence area. That was on the original conditional use permit. And all recommendations outlined in the July 2019 TIA shall be implemented and maintained. The conditional use permit is valid for a period of 5 years from the date of Board of County Commissioner approval. Landscaping will be continually maintained on site according to the 2019 landscaping plan approved with conditional use permit 2019-010 and construction permit 2019-144. And if a public sewer line is constructed within 400 feet of the property owner shall connect onto public sewer. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions, if not, the applicant does have a presentation.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Bingham?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wendling?
Yeah, on the last condition of 400 foot from the property, that line that they have planned will be within that 400 foot.
I believe so.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, another question.
Yes.
As I read through the concerns from the water plant as well as the city of Green River, they talked about phosphorus and issues supporting the buildup of algae. Am I missing something? Did I see anything in there with regard to addressing those issues? Because we do have that issue when we, very much so with that river as we prepare for our drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wendling. So that was brought up. That was a lengthy discussion about the phosphorus. I think the applicant can address some of the levels that are going to be in there. Some of the issues were how to test for it. It's got a long travel distance from where they're discharging and the location of the water treatment facility. There was discussions of, it was brought up by Mr. Lee with the Joint Powers Water Board about potentially using detergents. Loves could use detergents that were phosphorus free. The hard thing with that was regulating it. How do you regulate that? How do we regulate that? Go in there and determine whether they are or aren't. So it was discussed a lot. It wasn't put in there. There were some enforcement issues with it as to why, as far as testing to see if they are. And from what we understand, as far as the engineer, that the levels are very, very low as to require anything.
Mr. Chairman, after Loves presents and we get towards the end of comments, I see that we have Green River, Mr. Westkoff here, as well as Brian Seppi. I'd kind of like to make sure we allow time for them for public comment and tell us on that end of it, because these are the people that our citizens are going to look to make sure they get good water and that type of thing. Back up to one more thing. As I read through this, it's a permit. It's not to, it's not to approve dumping treated water into the river. It's access issues. Is that correct? Has that been clearly stated for the public, Eric?
Let me just clarify if there's any confusion. So under the original conditional use permit, they had one of the conditions that was in that previous permit was to have this underground injection control system. And so we have to revisit it because now we're changing from what was originally approved to now including this type of facility.
Yeah.
So it's actually reviewing the entire permit again with a different type of sewage system.
And if I recall correctly, when we worked on that original conditional use permit, the injection process was presented so we wouldn't have to use this new system as a disposal of treated water. I'm going to use treated water to define the effluent because so many people, all they've heard since this has hit the public access is that they're going to dump sewage into the river.
Yeah, right.
Now, if the ponds break down and that type of thing, there's that possibility. But if I recall correctly, this commission, back at the time the original conditional use permit was put together, struggled. I don't believe the permit would have been approved. That's just me. Had they not come forward with the injection process, and it would have moved into something along this design. I truly believe that, but that's for another conversation as the morning goes on. Thank you.
Eric, why did the injection system fail, and is it not repairable?
There was a bad geotechnical report. And so when they designed the system, the soils were not they couldn't handle, the soils that are currently out there cannot handle the septic system that was proposed. So that's without getting into the weeds of septic systems, because it's not my, that's not my expertise for sure.
Not in your wheelhouse.
But I mean, we've had systems like that happen north of Rock Springs where, sandy soils and clay soils, actually not sandy, but clay, it just doesn't percolate water. And so, with the soils they have out there, it does not percolate. So they've had to now take that, and truck it, basically, is what they're having to do. Sometimes daily, it depends on the showers and things like that. This is a very heavily used truck stop, which is a good thing. But that's really what happened, the breakdown of the system.
Thank you.
That geotech report.
Thanks, Eric.
Other questions for Mr. Biggin?
Yes,
Or
I
just-
do have one.
Commissioner Tillman?
The drainage from the shops, none of that oil or type of fluids would be allowed into that system, right?
No.
So
That's a
what are
separate
they going to
system.
do with those? So what are you going to do with the oils that are coming from the shops? How are you going to handle those?
Commissioner Tillman, I believe they can address that in their presentation.
All right,
Thank you.
Well, let's move to the presentation then. Welcome.
Okay, so my name is Scott Huseman, and I'm a design engineer for Apex companies. I work with Loves all over the country and work on several of these systems here and as well as other locations. Going to go ahead and just give you somewhat of a background on the system because it's definitely not ponds and it definitely can't discharge. And we'll talk about why that is, at least to the river. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, going to go through what the system is and some of the key components, go through current permits, go through the type of treated water effluent quality that we're going to get out of this system, and then also talk a little bit about the operational commitment, which we've talked about the license operator already. Yeah, so the existing leach field system, it was a septic tank and leach field. Leach field failed. It's just clay soils. It just absolutely will not take the water. Not exactly sure about the perk testing that was done previously. I wasn't involved with that, but it seems that it will take a little water up front and then it just seals off. And we're talking for months. It's not like within a few days it drains. So it's just not a viable option. We actually explored several different options. Some of them were deep well injection. One of them was actually trying to purchase land across Highway 374 to expand the leach field. But we had similar soils and just figured it was just going to be another problem. We also talked to, I believe it was the engineer of Green River when we first started this project, talking to them about what other options were and could we actually Loves was willing to help pay for the sewer line in that area because Loves would prefer to be on public sewer. And at the time, there was no money and they had no idea what the schedule was going to be. And so they just told us to proceed ahead with what we were doing. You can see a brief overview. It's a little small, but essentially you have the treatment system up here. You can see my hand. The line comes out and then runs along the right of way all the way down to Green River and then discharges in the river. This is a close-up of the system. A couple things to note. One is you can see the access has been moved, so that will be compliant with WDOT. The other thing to know is the existing system, a septic tank is going to stay in place. And then there's going to be 3 individual trains that will function. The first 2 are going to be installed completely, and they are set to take up to 23,000 gallons a day, which is the peak flow that we've been monitoring while they've been hauling. The third train, this one closest to the road, we are going to install the tanks and the piping, but the internal equipment is not going to be installed, and that's just going to be a backup in case we need more capacity in the future. We are having generators and automatic transfer switches At the end, we're having a post aeration tank just to make sure the DO is high going to the river. And then the other thing to note is these have a recirculation system in them with an anoxic tank, and they have some nutrient control as far as nitrate is concerned. So, but not phosphate.
What would that third tank, what kind of capacity will that add if when and if needed?
It would add another 12,500 gallons a day if needed. Yep. And it's really the full third train, not just the tank. So with the existing septic tank right now, we have a fairly fine screen system that's in it. Solid settle out, everything gets screened out, which is important because we're putting in a bio membrane reactor. And it has a real-time monitoring system on it. And I'll go into that a little bit later with some of the PLC printouts. That's the membrane bioreactor, right? It is an ultra filter, which will filter down to less than 1 micron. So essentially what happens is the waste is aerated, circulated, and then the only way for it to leave the plant is to get vacuumed through these plate membranes. So as far as, you think of a pond overflowing, that doesn't happen here. There's no way for the water to get out. If there were to be a backup of that magnitude, you would end up with some of that partially treated wastewater on the surface at Love's, which they would have to react to immediately. So it's not like that would ever end up down to the river.
Mr. Chairman, question.
Rendling, yeah.
Is Love have a plan in place to react in case this does occur to where it backs up?
Yes, they have a contractor on staff right now who's taking care of all of the hauling. And so they have people that are local. It's Jackman Construction who can get out there and take care of the issues if needed. Yep. One of the other things with this system is it is set up for 5 days of detention time. So most of your package plants only have about 1 day, 1.5 days of detention time. We use 5 days, and we can do that for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have to worry about the internal biology getting old because that will help with clarification. But in this case, we have the filter, so we don't need to worry about it. Plus, there's something called quaternary ammonias that are being used for sterilization these days. And some of them are required for restaurant use and such, and they just do not break down. And since we have a restaurant type system, we put this in there and it takes them 5 days. And so we make sure we can get all of those broke down, treated before we have the discharge. The other side of this design is we have half of the typical flow rates for these filter systems. So what we find is we have very long-term use out of them before they need cleaning. We haven't had failures with them. And in one case, we had where a system where a blower went down and we were still able to run all of the flow through only one of the trains so that we were able to continue to treat water to the same quality while we had to get the other blower replaced. So there's redundancy upon redundancy. This is the discharge pipe. It's essentially a perforated pipe that's going to be underneath the riverbed and will percolate up into the riverbed. We wanted to make sure that we were smooth with the bottom of the river because we know there are some siltation issues in the river. And this is what's been approved by the Army Corps of Engineers. This is the continuous control system. The way it's set up right now is we could log on and see all this at any time. It will send out reports every night at midnight, and the reports go to the contract operator. They go to the manufacturer's rep. They go to myself and Apex, and then we can also send them to Love's as well if we want. It's very interesting because it tells us a great deal of information of what's going on with the system. And what I really want to key you into is this vacuum PSI up here. That vacuum PSI shows what vacuum is being pulled through the filters for the discharge. And that is monitored so that when the pumps are running, we know if the filters are getting clogged and if they need to be cleaned, or if the vacuum is too low and therefore we think we have a tear in one of them. And that would possibly let some solids go, right? So the way the system is set up, and I misspoke last time I talked about this, it's actually an automatic system. So if we were to have a 0 PSI, which you don't need to worry about it here because the pump's not actually running, but if it was a 0 PSI while the pump was running, it's automatically shut down. And then that particular unit is not being used. There's 4 of these units in each train. So there'll be 8 of them to start with. So we'll still have capacity. And then we can also, it'll send an alarm to us. We can log in, we can look, we can see what's going on, and then we can get the operator out to the site to investigate. This is an example of the